I'm no specialist in religion, and I may not have come up with anything new, but do you happen to know if there ever existed a faith in a defective God? I mean, a God whose deficiencies don't arise from the simple-mindedness of his human creators, but constitute his most essential, immanent character. This would be a God limited in his omniscience and omnipotence, one who can make mistakes in foreseeing the future of his works, one who can find himself horrified by the course of events he has set in motion. Hi guys, it's Quinn here. With AI content on the rise, YouTube is recommending human narrators less and less. If you appreciate my content, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Thanks so much, guys. Solaris by Stanisław Lem is a 1961 Polish philosophical science fiction novel that explores the limits of human understanding through the story of a psychologist sent to an enigmatic research station orbiting a mysterious planet covered in a gelatinous and potentially sentient ocean. Solaris was first discovered nearly a century before the narrator Calvin's birth, and early scientific consensus declared it incapable of supporting life due to its unstable orbit around two suns, one red, one blue. The Gamow-Shapley hypothesis claimed that such binary systems could not sustain planets with conditions stable enough for life to evolve. Initial predictions stated that Solaris would be destroyed by its red sun within 1 million years. The orbits of such planets are constantly changing from the gravitational interplay of two suns circling around one another. The resulting perturbations successively reduce and expand the planet's orbit, and the beginnings of life, if they emerge, are destroyed by radiant heat or freezing cold. Surprisingly, within a few decades of its discovery, astronomers observed that Solaris's orbit remained stable despite expectations. This prompted renewed scientific investigation. The anomaly elevated Solaris from obscurity to a planetary body of intense interest, leading to the Ottenskold expedition 4 years later, which launched satellites and gathered atmospheric data. This early exploration revealed a planet almost entirely covered by a single massive ocean, with land masses smaller in total area than Europe, though the planet itself had a 20% larger diameter than Earth. The rocky, desert-like islands were sparse and mainly located in the southern hemisphere. Studies were also conducted on the atmosphere, which contained no oxygen, and highly detailed measurements were taken of the density of the planet, as well as its albedo and other astronomical indicators. As expected, no life forms were found either on the land or in the ocean. Yet the ocean displayed unexplained activity that defied all known natural processes, prompting further expeditions. A more advanced mission led by Shanahan confirmed the ocean was not inert. Scientists aboard the mission were divided. Biologists suggested it was primitive, a massive organic cell, while physicists proposed it was a sophisticated, organized system, a machine of some kind. The object of their disagreement was the ocean. On the basis of their analysis, it had been designated an organic formation. At the time, no one dared say it was alive. Yet, while the biologists saw it as a primitive being, something like an immense syncytium. In other words, a single monstrously grown fluid cell, even though they called it a pre-biological form, that extended across the entire globe in a jelly-like covering whose depth reached several miles in places. The astronomers and physicists, on the other hand, claimed it must be a highly organized structure, perhaps exceeding terrestrial organisms in complexity, since it was capable of actively influencing the orbit of its plane, for no other cause had been discovered that might explain Solaris's behavior. Physicists eventually coined the term plasmic machine, suggesting it might not be alive in the traditional sense, but could perform purposeful planetary-scale actions. The ocean appeared to manipulate gravitational fields not by machinery, but by reshaping space-time itself. Research revealed that the ocean did not operate at all like our gravitators, which of course would have been impossible, but that it was capable of directly remodeling space-time specifications, which led, among other things, to variations in the measurement of time at one and the same meridian on Solaris. These findings disrupted accepted laws of physics and initiated a flood of radical new hypotheses. In a matter of weeks, the dispute escalated and drew in every major authority, challenging the Gamow-Shapley hypothesis for the first time in 80 years. For a while, defenders of the theory argued that the ocean of Solaris had nothing to do with life. They claimed it wasn't even pre-biological, but purely geological. An unusual structure, yes, but one that merely helped keep Solaris in orbit by adjusting to gravitational changes. There were opposing ideas that also emerged. Among them was the Civita-Viti hypothesis. It suggested that the ocean was the result of a kind of dialectical evolution. It began as a primitive chemical soup, reacting sluggishly, but when faced with threats to its survival, like orbital changes, it evolved in a radically different way than life on Earth. It didn't go through the usual stages like developing single-celled organisms, animals, or plants. It never formed a nervous system. Instead, it skipped straight to becoming a homeostatic ocean, a system that could regulate itself and its environment. In short, it didn't take millions of years to adapt and eventually produce intelligent life. From the beginning, it had the power to control its surroundings. Eventually, despite decades of intense research, scientists grow no closer to understanding the planet's ocean. By the time Kelvin arrives on Solaris, the library is full of data, but it all amounts to a quagmire of facts, a confusing accumulation of partial insights and failed interpretations. The ocean's refusal to interact consistently with human stimuli and its seeming disinterest in human technology after the initial years of contact led many to feel that the efforts have reached a dead end. There is no structure in the ocean resembling cells, proteins, or a nervous system, and it defies both biological and mechanical classification. In the early stages of research, it occasionally modified components of equipment lowered into it, seemingly engaging with the apparatus, but after the first 2 years, it ceased responding entirely, as though it had lost interest. Even catastrophic events like the crash and explosion of an auxiliary rocket elicited no observable reaction from the ocean. Researchers begin to speak privately of withdrawal from Solaris, not as a resolution, but as a quiet admission of defeat. Yet for many, particularly younger scientists, Solaris had become more than a scientific mystery. It symbolized the outer limits of human cognition. The problem was no longer just the ocean, it was the problem of understanding itself. Popular narratives romanticized the ocean as cosmic yogi, an omniscient intelligence too advanced to acknowledge humanity. But this interpretation proved false, for the ocean clearly acts. It simply does so in ways that do not conform to human expectations. Philosophers and scientists alike turned to increasingly extreme metaphors. Some argued that the ocean was not a higher life form, but a regressed one, an organic relic beyond conventional classification. Others speculated it was a kind of planetary tumor, formed by and consuming whatever life had once existed there. The debates grew metaphysical. Could thought exist without consciousness? Was this even thought at all? Solaris's scale and behavior undermined the categories humans used to make sense of reality. As with a mountain or planet, scale transforms meaning. Is a mountain a very large rock? Is a planet a huge mountain? Familiar words no longer fit. Solaris remained an unsolvable enigma that confronted humanity not just with alien otherness, but with the limits of its own understanding. But something has changed by the time of the arrival of the psychologist Kelvin. In response to unauthorized experiments, the planet has started materializing guests, beings made from neutrinos who appear fully corporeal. Kelvin learns that these guests are reflections of the psyche and the memories of the humans on board the Solaris station. For Kelvin, it recreates Hari, his former lover who had died by suicide years before. Her reappearance forces him to confront his guilt, his loss, and his love. Hari reappears even after Kelvin tries to get rid of her, and she even slowly begins to realize that she is not human and that she is causing him pain. Eventually, she chooses to end her existence with the help of some of the other scientists on board. The purpose of these guests is never fully explored, but the book suggests some possibilities. The ocean may have been running experiments on them, probing their minds, extracting their memories, and recreating people from their past with frightening precision. These manifestations might have been meant as gifts, shaped by their deepest subconscious desires. For Solaris, they weren't individuals in the way that humans see each other. It saw them literally through what was in their brains. It understood them on a molecular level, but not emotionally or socially. It doesn't know what these recreated people mean to them. It's like if you built a machine based on blueprints without knowing its purpose. Solaris might have been reading their memories without understanding them, copying the most deeply engraved parts of their mind, not to communicate, but simply because it could. At the end of Solaris, Kelvin puts forward a new hypothesis to explain the nature of the planet and its ocean. After all the failed attempts at communication, the decades of research, and the mountains of conflicting data, he suggests that the ocean might be something more unusual and more unsettling than previously imagined. A defective God. This idea isn't meant to be religious in the traditional sense. Instead, it's a way to describe a being that is incredibly powerful and intelligent, but also fundamentally flawed, limited, or incomplete. It's not a God in control of everything, but one that struggles with its own creation, unable to predict or manage the consequences of its actions. This hypothesis helps reframe the ocean not as a total mystery or an indifferent force of nature, but as a kind of mind that is trapped within its own structure, just as the defective God is bound by matter and unable to escape the reality it helped create. Throughout the novel, the ocean shows signs of intelligence. It responds to stimuli, creates massive organized formations, and even produces exact physical copies of people from the memories of the scientist. But these actions don't lead anywhere. The responses are never consistent, and the ocean never shows any intention that can be clearly understood. This unpredictability suggests a lack of full control, or at least a way of thinking that is too alien for humans to interpret. Kelvin's idea of a God that can make mistakes, feel horror, or act without understanding fits well within the behavior of the ocean. It may be experimenting with the humans, or trying to understand them through the creation of replicas, but it doesn't follow any pattern. This could mean that it doesn't know what it's doing, or that its goals change in ways that they cannot detect. Like the conceptual defective God, it might want more than it can achieve. It may only slowly realize the limits of its own powers. That makes it not a monster and not a deity in any comforting sense, but a being in a state of confusion or growth, possibly even suffering under the weight of its own abilities. Perhaps Solaris is precisely the cradle of this divine infant of yours, added Snot. An ever more distinct smile was ringing his eyes with little creases. Perhaps in your conception, this is the origin, the seed of the god of despair. Perhaps its exuberant childhood is way beyond our comprehension, and everything our libraries of Solariana contain is merely a catalog of his infant reflexes. I would also like to add here the speculative idea that the ocean is not developing, but was instead withdrawing, just like a god who once acted with purpose, but has now given up or become disillusioned. Early in the scientific explorations of Solaris, the ocean interacted with more probes and experiments, but over time, it stopped responding. This shift could be seen as a kind of retreat, not out of hostility, but from a realization that contact or understanding is impossible. That silence, like the despair of the defective God, is not passive but full of meaning. It's the silence of something that may once have tried and failed. What's unsettling is that whether the ocean is a growing intelligence or a retreating one, it remains fundamentally cut off from us. Kelvin's hypothesis helps explain why no progress has been made despite the decades of effort. Perhaps the ocean isn't just unknown, but unknowable, not because of a lack of data, but because of a deep mismatch between its nature and ours. The defective God is not beyond understanding because it's too perfect, but because it's too much like us, limited, confused, and isolated, just on a much larger scale. In the end, Kelvin's theory doesn't solve the mystery of Solaris, but it shifts the focus. It suggests that the problem isn't just with the planet or the ocean, it's with human assumptions about intelligence, communication, and meaning. The ocean might be intelligent, but not in any way that connects to human thought. The idea of the defective God might reflect our deepest fears that even the most powerful minds can be lonely, broken, or lost, and that the universe might contain things that we will never fully understand, no matter how hard we try. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Make sure to like if you enjoyed the content and subscribe for more science fiction literature videos.